So another film I got to see this week is Past Lives, which is directed by Celine Song. And I really like it when a film has a stickiness to it. And after I finished the film, I got home in my flat and I had usually I like to put on music or a podcast when I have a shower, but for some reason I didn't feel like it, and I ended up having this really elongated, moody shower, thinking about the film and how sticky it was, how great the ending was, and I was really excited to talk about it, and I'm excited for other people to see it, because I think it's really, really good. Past Lives is a film that's mostly in Korean. I think it's about 85% in Korean with bits of English in there, which I don't know why it's worth acknowledging, but I was sort of like, English was there, but it was very much a very small, insignificant part of it. It explores this concept of in-yun, which is acknowledged in the film as a sort of cultural thing, but also like very sappy and romantic, and uses the concept to try and get people to sleep with you. And it's this idea of how fate brings two people's lives together based on countless connections from their previous lives. So something about me and you draws each other together, not just because of this life, but because of ways in which our souls have communicated in the past life.
James, you're moving me serious.
You know, they didn't have mics in previous lives. It was just two guys on a rock. And then how, you know, even if we're not here together, maybe in a future life, something different would have happened.
Metaphysical, existential stuff.
Yes. And this film takes place in 3 different time periods, in the early noughties, 2010s, and then present day. We start in South Korea, and Na Young has a crush on another boy in her cast called Hae Sung. And they're too young to properly be in love, but they're probably old enough to feel in love. It's like kind of age where they're sort of like 11, 12. And just as, you know, even their parents are starting to acknowledge that, you know, there's clearly this bond and this connection between them, Na Young's parents are planning to move countries to go and live in the US. And so naturally they drift apart, their lives move onwards. 12 years later, we catch up, and this is all sort of very much in the beginning. And I'm going to be very careful not to spoil this film and where it goes, because I think what it reveals to you, I think is really special. So don't worry too much about the plot. I'm going to be very light touch. 12 years later, Na Young is living in New York as an aspiring writer. And just to mention, this is a film written and directed by Celine Song, who this is very heavily based on her life. So she, as a writer, her background is in the stage, as a playwright. She now directs films, but like this is all very personal. And then Hae Sung, played by Na Young's played by Greta Lee, and Hae Sung's played by Tiu, is studying engineering still in Seoul. And they have this sort of weird happenstance link through a Facebook group that her dad is connected to that links them back together. And they're both like, oh my God, that guy, I haven't thought about him in such a long time. And just like a lot of people would have done in that time, you find a way to sort of Skype call them. And despite the time difference, they arrange to like have a call and say hi. And they meet, and you know, one person's in the middle of the night, the other person's first thing in the morning. And they have this really sort of like quiet, contemplative discussion where they have this, again, this connection. And they sort of acknowledge that when they were younger, they felt something, but you know, they were so young, they can't really acknowledge what it was. And there's also this this connection to an immigrant experience, which I'll get onto later, whereas, you know, Na Young's living in America and she's adopting a whole new culture, but she still very much identifies as Korean and wants to connect with that. And Hae Sung really represents like keeping in touch with that Korean side of her. So they sort of can't explain why, but they end up doing these daily phone calls. And, you know, night or day for one of them while they're both studying. And they keep calling and have these really elongated phone conversations, but they realize that both of them are studying, no one's willing to move or travel, and they make the decision to stop talking and basically put the thing on ice. It's very sad, and they're both sort of like, well, what do we do? Cut 12 years into the future, we get to our final time period. And again, this isn't spoiler, this is like the very sort of premise of the film. We catch them that much later.
And it's now before midnight.
And it's now, well, I'm going to get onto that. It really is very much loads of references to it. So this is I think, about 45 minutes into the film where I think it really begins, and it really kicks into this higher gear of a really soft, intimate, but very intense film. And this whole idea is that after all this time, Hae Sung decides he's going to visit New York. And Na Young's very excited to see him, but you know, she now has a husband and has a whole different life. And I think Past Lives is a really special film. It's a feature film by Celine Song, who has a background in the stage. And I can really see the DNA of a stage director in this film, but it never feels stagey.
Okay.
Not in the way that I think we've talked about other films feeling stagey.
Yeah.
It really indulges in the larger canvas that a camera and cinema can provide. It has a really wonderful sense of place, both from Seoul and New York, and it's one of the most dramatic films I've seen, but only in undertone. It nothing about the dialogue was sensationalist, and it even tries to, at many times, like bring itself back down to earth. And like, well, that's like, you know, I talked about the Indian being a really cheesy concept and sort of addressing really obvious dynamics that are in play. It's like, we know that this is on your mind, and we're actually going to subvert what you think about that. I'm trying to be really sort of light on spoilers here. And everything takes the form in very realistic conversations, and I think those just constantly layer and reveal the emotions of these characters, and I just got such a wonderful sense over who these people really were as the film evolved. And there are, as you said, many comparisons to, I think, specifically Before Sunset.
Oh, my favourite.
So, which is, I think, both of our favourite ones. And all the Before films, I think, have a really strong sense of place, like the cities they're based in, the countries they're based in, but I think, despite that, you're always hyper-focused on the conversation and the dynamic, and that can actually very quickly fall away. And you find that similarly with this. And
if anyone's lost, we're talking about the Before trilogy. We did a bonus episode for any new listeners. Go back and check that out earlier this year. Great trilogy.
And this entire film lives in between the lines of dialogue. I have never seen a film that lets each line of dialogue breathe for so long. And it sounds boring, but it wasn't. Like every line was given seconds to breathe, and it was all about the raising of eyebrow, like glancing at lips, prolonged eye contact. And I just got the sense this is a really real story, a really personal story. It felt like it had been, you know, when something feels really intimately and delicately put together. Like I didn't want to sneeze near it in case it all just blew off the table. Like, you know, just like beautifully woven. It felt really true. Performances were incredible. Framing was something that you'd see entire scenes start with different framing, and towards the end the framing was opposite, and it was for a real reason. I just thought, oh, you've really taken me on a visual journey there. Yeah, it's one of the most nostalgic films I've seen in a really long time. And I started Googling the definition of nostalgia, because I was like, oh, nostalgia
pain from an old wound.
Yeah, it's like
as
pain
Don Draper
from a past.
told me in the first episode of Mad Men.
Right, yeah, it's like pain from something that's lost that you'll never get to see again. Like all this like idea of what memory is, how it provides you with a sense of who you are, but also for something that you've lost and can't get back for a moment in time. And just like, what is love?
Baby, don't hurt me.
Baby, don't hurt me. I think I really, really enjoyed it. I don't want to say really anything about what happens in the sort of last hour of the film. But stickiness, realness, and just really delicate and intense in the best way. I really hope people go and see it.
I mean, I was already sold. I saw a trailer before Barbie for it, and I was like, oh, wow, this looks really good. And then I did the thing. I'm not looking at that anymore, because I actually want to see that. And I will absolutely make an effort to see it, and hopefully we can talk about it maybe on a bonus.
I'd love to. I'd love to go into spoilers. I'm sure when people see it, they'll want to hear more about it.
And that's it also sounds right up my street. And I think, you know, when these kind of films are done right, it can really, it's just so good. That middle ground, that kind of non-English speaking kind of romantic cinema. I'm thinking about Worst Person in the World.
Yeah.
As well. Just great. Give me something else in a different style.
It'd be a great double bill with Worst Person.
Oh, good.
I think so, yeah. It'd be really good.
Did you miss the beginning of this one because you were trying to get ice cream?
No, I made it, but I will say, I think this is what I saw Passages, which we're talking about later. These smaller non-studio films have less marketing association trailers to show. So it was like a 1:30 screening. I got in at like 1:38. And the film was playing by 1:42.
Whoa,
so you had 12 minutes from the screening time to like the film starting. I'm just saying, guys, watch out. Warning. You should not, don't take, I've got 25 minutes every single time.
Yeah, I was on the Prince Charles Cinema website the other day, and they were like, in all caps, bold and red, our films start 10 minutes after the show time. Do not be late. Look,
I think if you're going to see like the Green Flash Lantern Man of Steel 3,
you're
probably going to get 25 minutes, 30 minutes of ads.
Yeah.
But for these smaller films, just watch it. You could miss it. And they're the films that you don't want to miss the start of.
So that was Past Lives. We will hopefully definitely talk about that again once I've seen it. But if anyone out there has seen it, is there anyone else that loved it, write in to hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com. Why is it whenever we close it off,
I
there's
always
always
have
another thought?
There's always
The
another
epilogue.
thought.
Go on then.
Again, I did comment before on the immigrant experience. I love the way it described the immigrant experience of someone who'd been a child in another country. And then that idea of they come to a new country, develop a relationship with a new country and people from that new country. They themselves feel really distinctively, in this case, Korean. But when they are faced with someone who is fully Korean, who lives in Korea, and and then they actually see how different they are, and they're really confronted with like this lack of identity, of actually belonging nowhere. And I thought that was really well done. Interesting, it made me think of Joyride, which I know is trying to do something completely different.
Yeah.
So much of that comedy framing was about the immigrant experience, the sense of identity and who you are. And I actually praised Joyride of the many things I kind of didn't like about it. I thought it was an interesting comedic take on that, and I thought this film really sort of captured that, and I think Celine Song's talked about that, and the cast were talking about their own experiences of being immigrants in different countries and how that frames who they are. Just really smart and subtle, and again, just intimate and soft.
Did you ever see The Farewell?
No.
Oh, that was good. That was great with Awkwafina, where it's the Chinese American family, and they have to go back to China because their matriarch is, the grandmother of the matriarch is ill, but she doesn't know she's ill.
Oh, yeah.
And they all have to kind of so it says based on a true lie.
Yes.
And that has a lot in it about, Awkwafina's side of the family who moved to the States and left all this behind. And then there's the family who are in China. But then there's also an uncle who went off and lived in Japan. And I loved all that. It's just another great film. I'm still waiting for Lulu Wang's next film, actually. I don't know when that's coming.
Oh. When was Farewell out?
2019.
Oh, get me on.
Anyway, that was Past Lives.
Yes.